everyone, welcome back to my channel and thanks for joining me for today's video where we will be playing my winter reading game. This is my monthly game for January where we move around a board and we choose books either by the luck of the dice roll or by prompts, and I cannot wait to see what books we are going to end up with. We had an interesting collection of books I think last year when I played this game. So we'll see if that continues on today. I will say I picked the perfect day to play this game because it is 16 degrees out in Fahrenheit and winter is definitely upon my area. No snow yet as far as today goes, but from what I've read, we'll probably be getting snow later this week. Not sure the amount, but this week, definitely a great week to be playing this game. So before we start, let me just quickly go over how this game is going to work. This is our board. We got our snowflakes that, very wintry. And then we have the tokens that we'll move around. So there are 3 different tokens we could land on in this game. I'll put them up here, up there, one of the sides. And the first token is the pick a prompt token. That token's pretty easy. If we land on that, we have to, I think we have a spin wheel for this one, and we will choose a random prompt on the spin wheel, and we just have to choose a book that fits that prompt. Very simple. Next up is our cover jar. If you've seen some previous monthly reading games I've done, you probably will recognize this, but basically in here, there are 50 book covers, and if we land on the cover prompt, we choose four of them. We choose 7 of them, and then we do some dice rolls to see which of those 7 we will end up reading. This is the scariest prompt for me because I have absolutely no control over what book I end up reading if I get the cover prompt. Cover jar prompt. The last token is the most complicated of the 3, and that is the genre prompt token. So if I land on this, I have to use a spinning wheel to choose a random genre, and then I have to throw a series of die to determine how I choose a book within that genre. It could be by having to find a title with a certain letter, or a book that has a certain color on the cover. The sky's the limit. So this will make more sense if we land on that token during this game. But that is the basis of the game. We're going to use an 8-sided die and, roll it as many times as we need to get all the way through the game. So let's go ahead and bring up our game board and let's do our first roll for our winter reading game 2026. All right, here's our game board. I'm excited to see how this game goes. Let's go ahead, do our first roll and see how we're choosing our first book. Here we go. And that is a 7, starting off very strong, which is very unusual. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we got the cover jar prompt, which is the scariest prompt because I have absolutely no control over which book we're going to end up with. All right, we are all set up, and here are our covers that range from either being wintry books or in genres that give me the wintry vibe. So let's go ahead and choose 7 books out of here. These will be our potential options. All right, book number 1 is, can't even open it, Dark Matter, a Ghost Story by Michelle Paver. All right, interesting. Book number 2 is The Inner Circle by Kevin George. All right. I'm not sure what genre that one is. Book 3 is, reindeer just fell over, The Sanatorium by Sarah Pierce. Book 4 is Beartown by Frederick Bachman, a title I actually recognize. Book 5 is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, another title I recognize. I think that one's a Dark Academia. Book 6 is Winter Siege by Ariana Franklin and Samantha Norman. And the last book is going to be this one here. And it is The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. All right, next up, let's go ahead and spin. Let's go ahead and roll our die and we'll see how we are going to sort these books. I'll put what each number stands for up in one of the corners or sides. And let's go ahead and see how we're sorting these books. All right, here we go. And that is 5. So we'll be sorting by year published. All right, the books have been sorted by publication year. We're going from 2010 for Dark Matter up until 2021 for The Maidens. We're going to go ahead and roll our 8-sided die one more time. Numbers 1 through 7 correspond to these books, and if I get 8, that means I get to choose. I have no idea what I want for this roll, what book I want, but I'm excited to see what we're going to end up with. So here we go. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have The Sanatorium by Sarah Pierce. All right, that roll did not go too bad. I think that was a pretty strong start for this game. We rolled a 7, so we are moving our way through the board. The only downside was that we landed on a cover jar, which meant we had absolutely no control over what book we ended up with. And we ended up with a mystery thriller named The Sanatorium, which is by Sarah Pierce. And it's also the first book in her Detective Elin Warner series. So this book is set in the Swiss Alps, so that's kind of where the wintry feeling comes from. And it follows Detective Elin Warner, who's taking some time off from being a detective. She ends up being invited to this hotel that used to be a sanatorium up in the Swiss Alps by her estranged brother and his fiancée to kind of celebrate their engagement. She ends up accepting and arrives at the hotel in the midst of a threatening storm, and the hotel's kind of making her nervous, and when the following day her brother's fiance is found missing, things start going wrong. And it's up to Elin Warner to not only find her brother's fiance, but also there's another woman that has gone missing that no one realizes is missing. So there's a lot of things kind of going on, it sounds like. I'm interested to see how this book reads. It is a little bit under 400 pages, but I feel like mystery thrillers tend to read fast, so hopefully that's the case for this one. And yeah, I'm going to get to reading, and I will meet you guys back here when I'm halfway through the book, which will hopefully be today, and let you know my initial thoughts on this wintry mystery thriller. So I'll see you guys soon. All right, I am back. It's been about 5 hours since we last talked. It's now 7 o'clock at night, and I am halfway through the sanatorium. Took me a little bit longer to get here because I had a couple of things, well, really one thing that I had to do today that took me a lot longer than I thought I would. I have to get my passport renewed, and this is the first time I am attempting it online, so I had to take my own photograph, and that was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Hopefully, they will accept this photograph and I don't have to redo it, but I guess I'll find out some point in the future about that. But that took up about an hour of my time. Don't ask. There's a lot of things going on while I was trying to get that picture taken. And that kind of cut down on my reading time a little bit, but I am halfway through now, which I'm glad. It's only 7 o'clock at night, so I can still definitely finish this book today, which is basically my main goal. The good thing about this book so far is that it is a very fast read. I think part of that is that the chapters are extremely short, and I feel like whenever the chapters are very short, it just for some reason makes the book read a lot faster. And I find that happens a lot in the mystery thriller genre. So the book so far has kind of been going along with the description that's on the back of the book. The book does follow Elin, who's the detective from the United Kingdom who is now in Switzerland to celebrate her estranged brother and his fiance's engagement. So we start off the book getting just some hints about what has happened in Elin's past. We know that from the very first couple of chapters that her younger brother died at some point in his life. We don't really know when. Her part of that is the reason part of his dying is the reason that she's kind of become estranged from her other brother, the middle child in her family, Isaac, which I may have called Jacob when I talked about this book before. But anyway, the middle brother is Isaac. And it seems like this isn't a new thing. They kind of clashed in childhood as well, just because of their differing personalities. Isaac is more controlling, I guess you could say, and always trying to do things to get under Elend's skin, and that just continued on until adulthood. We do know also that Elend is dating her boyfriend, Will, who is some type of architect or building designer, and he's also come along to Switzerland to meet up with her brother and her brother's fiance. And then the next morning, after Elin and Will get to this hotel that's set in a former sanatorium that housed tuberculosis patients, her brother's fiance has disappeared. And that is kind of where the mystery thriller begins. We also learn about another person who has disappeared as well in this story. And we start to kind of learn if there are any connections or not between these two disappearances. The reason that Elin was able to make this journey as well is that she's been on a leave of absence because of something that happened during her last case that has kind of caused her to question if she's able to do her job or not. And then she gets thrown into this case and kind of has to manage her feelings, her confidence as a detective. So far the book kind of just feels like a generic mystery thriller where there is, a plot of someone disappearing or being killed, and then someone else, the main character in the story, has to solve it. There's nothing that's really like popped out at me that has made this stand out from other mystery thrillers. I'm still enjoying it though because I do just enjoy mystery thrillers, and I like to see how the authors take the case and how they kind of get our characters to the end point where they're able to kind of conclude who the bad guy is and kind of wrap up the case at the end. I always like to see how an author is going to get from that beginning point to that end point. So that's the main reason I enjoy mystery thrillers. Plus, their plot is usually pretty quick as well, and there's some suspension tension that is kind of sprinkled in throughout the plot as well, which is, the case for this mystery thriller too. So the characters in this book are okay, I would say. The main character, Elin, you can just tell that she has no confidence in herself whatsoever. And having her brother around now is definitely not helping with that because he continues to kind of just tear her down. Not in subtle ways, I would say. So you got that interaction going on there, which is interesting. The interaction between her and Will, her boyfriend, is that she keeps thinking that Will is frustrated with her about how she's responding to things. And it just seems like every time that she interacts with him, she believes he is frustrated with her, though some of the times he doesn't really show any signs of that as far as his reactions go. And just the amount of times that this is occurring is starting to kind of get on my nerves because I'm just tired of kind of reading about that without anything kind of coming of it. Like at some point, she needs to confront him or he needs to do something to show that, he's getting annoyed at her. Like something needs to happen because the same thing happening over and over again is just starting to get a little bit old as far as their interaction is going. The setting has been wonderful being up in the Swiss Alps in this kind of secluded location that you can only get there by a very curvy, dangerous road, and snow is falling, a snowstorm is coming, and it just definitely gives you the wintry feels, and definitely a great time of the year to be reading this book as far as that goes. One other thing I will say before I get back to reading is that one way that tension is built in this book is just by letting the reader just know hints of pieces of what the characters whose viewpoints you're reading from know. And that can get kind of frustrating at times just because I feel like if I'm reading from the viewpoint of a certain character, I should know at least the main character. I should know the things that that main character knows. And that that just gets a little bit frustrating when some of that information is just slowly released throughout the book when the main character has known it from the beginning. I get it for because we do get some other alternative viewpoints in this book, and I do get kind of keeping some of the things that they know away from the reader to build attention. But when it comes to the main character, I feel like I should know everything that the main character knows. And in this story so far, and I'm halfway through, there's still some things that the main character knows that I, the reader, still haven't learned. And that part is definitely frustrating me a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see how the second half of the book goes. So far, I would give this about 3.5, which is kind of where I rate mystery thrillers in general, unless there's like something very unique about the story. Again, I'm still enjoying it. I'm still having a fun time reading it. It's just that there's nothing that really like pops out at me that makes this story set it off from other basic mystery thrillers in this genre. So that is where I am. I am hopeful to get the rest of this book finished tonight, and hopefully, I'll be able to come back to you and give you my final review and do our next roll. We'll see. I do have to go out and get the mail now because I forgot to do that earlier, and now it's pitch black out. It's back down to like 15, 16 degrees out, so cold. And reading a mystery thriller about people disappearing and things like that occurring doesn't really make me want to go outside in the dark and the cold. But I'm going to go do that because I have to get my mail anyway. So I'm going to go do that. Then I'm going to come back in and start reading. And hopefully, I'll see you guys later tonight and let you know my final thoughts on the sanatorium. And yeah, I'll see you guys later tonight. All right, it is 11 o'clock at night now. So, I talked to you guys last, I think, at 5 o'clock. So, it's been what, 6 hours? And I have completed The Sanatorium by Sarah Pearson, the first book in her Detective Elin, I forget the last name, series. I am so happy to have gotten this book done in one day. I'm very proud of myself. And I think the reason I was able to do it is that it was a mystery thriller and it was written it was a fairly high pace book that kind of got me reading it without having to take too many breaks. So this worked out well. So the second half of this book kind of continued on from the first half. The pacing, like I said, continued to be very good, except right at the end. I felt like the end was drawn out a little bit too much, starting about the last like 50 to 60 pages of the book. I felt like that could definitely have been a little bit more concise. And that is the part where I started to feel a little bit more bogged down right at the ending. And I think it was because the author had a lot of things that she kind of needed to conclude. And I think it was a little bit more complicated, the conclusion of this book, than it necessarily needed to be. And if the ending was a little bit simpler, I think the pacing would have continued just fine. And the book could definitely have been a little bit shorter. When the game chose this book for me, when I saw that the book was almost 400 pages, I was kind of curious if that was going to be an issue because I feel like for a lot of mystery thrillers, 400 pages is a little bit on the longer side. I feel like most of the times they're in that like 300 to 350 range. And yeah, I think this one could have been a little bit stronger in the 350-page range if the conclusion was a little bit more concise, I guess you could say. The other thing that I found a little bit interesting is that there were a couple of instances in the second half of the book where I felt like the main character, Elin, the detective, did some things that were a little bit out of character for her based on her history as both a detective as well as the history of what happened during the last case that she tried to solve in the UK. I felt like some of the decisions that she made, based on that history, were a little bit strange in the second half of the book. They weren't like big decisions that she had to make, but there's a couple of smaller decisions that I felt that she may have gone in a different direction than she did. So I felt like those were a little bit out of character, but overall, I did end up enjoying this book. It was a good mystery thriller. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. There wasn't again anything even in the second half of the book that really stood out that would push it to a higher star rating. But if you're just looking for if you're just looking for a suspenseful mystery thriller that is set during the winter time, this is definitely a book to check out. There are definitely some triggers in here. There's several that I did not think were going to be in the story till I got to the end. But there are definitely some triggers in this book, as I feel there are in most mystery thrillers, but there is a wide range of them in this story. So definitely something to check out before reading the book. Now, I will say when I was looking at the ratings on various book rating review sites that there was a lot of polarity between people who have read this book. Some people really loved it. Some people did not enjoy it at all and were critiquing kind of like the characters in the story and some of the plot points in the story. I will say this book was a celebrity celebrity book club choice for, I think, does Reese Witherspoon have a book club? It may be her. If not, I'll if it's not that one, I'll put the name of it up here. But I think that's why some of the polarity occurred because if you don't read a lot of mystery thrillers, if you're coming from different genres, I feel like the mystery thriller is kind of a unique genre in that it's really plot and suspense focused, not so much on character building for a lot of these stories. So if you're looking for kind of that type of thing, then that could be why some of the ratings are lower. To me, as far as my ratings go, I rate this alongside most of the mystery thrillers that I've read, which is about a 3.5 out of 5. Unless there's, like, a very unique plot point or something very unique about the book, I typically don't rate mystery thrillers higher than that, just because I feel like they're more of a book that you read for fun. You're not really looking into the characters, you just wanna get some good suspense in and, see if you can figure out the mystery yourself along the way, and I felt that this book did a great job at that. I feel like it's a good mystery thriller book and, race along a lot of the other mystery thriller books that I have read. I definitely want to read the rest of the books in the series. This book ended on a cliffhanger. The actual plot points of the story in this book were all completely wrapped up, but the epilogue kind of brought along a new cliffhanger that takes you into the second book of the series. So I definitely want to read the second book of the series because I'm kind of curious how the author wraps up the second book in the series. I think The Sanatorium may have been her debut novel, and that could be why the ending kind of got a little bit convoluted. So I'm wondering if the author kind of builds on her experience of writing this first book and has a more I don't want to say simplistic, but a more com not really complete, but a less complicated ending, I guess you could say. So I'll get around to reading that at some point. Maybe not this year, who knows? But at some point, I will read the second book in the series. But that wraps it up for our first book of our winter reading game, which was again The Sanatorium by Sarah Pierce. So let's go ahead, bring up that game board, and do our second roll. All right. Here we go. Let's see what we get for our second roll of the game. Can't do much better than 7, but let's find out. 6. Not bad. Not bad at all. Not quite as good as 7, but we'll take that. All right, let's move our piece and see where we end up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, this time we have pick a prompt. The die is being nice to us today. We got a 6, so we moved forward another 6 spots and we landed on a pick a prompt. And for our winter reading game, that is going to be on a spinning wheel. So let me bring up the spinning wheel and then we'll go ahead and see what prompt we're going to have to fulfill. All right, here is our spinning wheel that has some amount of prompts. I can't remember how many, maybe 25. I really am not sure how many I actually put on here, but let's go ahead and spin it and see what prompt we are going to get. Here we go. Or not. There we go. All right. Hopefully it's a good, easy one. I think we had a sports romance last year. All right. Not too bad. We have to find a book with a winter sleigh or a snowmobile, some sort of winter vehicle on the cover of the book. All right, well, let me start looking around and see what I can find. I always find that the cover ones are harder to find because I can't just like search, a word in the title or something like that. So let me go look through some options and I'll meet you guys back here once I have at least one option to go from with. All right, I'll be back soon. It is late. It took me so long to find a book with the sleigh on the cover that I don't even want to let you know what time of night it is right now. But I finally found one. The first couple that I came across were books that were short stories, and I really wanted to find a full-length novel, and I finally found one, definitely full length, almost 400 pages, and it is called it's not called Victoria, that's the author's name. You can tell that it's very late at night. It is called What Happens at Christmas. It's by Victoria Alexander, and you can see on the corner of the page there is a sleigh on it. So it meets our prompt. Yay. So this book is a historical romance book. From the reviews I've read, it's supposed to be kind of like a sweet, funny book, and it follows Camille, who is Lady Lindingham, and she lives at the Christmas not oh my gosh, it's too late to be doing this. She lives at Millworth Manor, and this Christmas she has invited Prince Nikolai Prusinski and hopes to coax a marriage proposal from him. Her relatives are going to be in attendance as well, but her relatives are actually a troupe of actors hired to impersonate a proper English family in order to fool the prince. It says games are going to be played, motives are going to be revealed, and mayhem may ensue. Hearts will be won and lost in the most romantic, magical season of all. So it sounds like it's just going to be like kind of a fun hijinks caper type book. So I'm excited to see how it goes. It is set at Christmas, but I don't think it's going to be one of those like Christmas romance books that fully revolve around Christmas. It sounds like there's probably a lot going on where Christmas will play a part, but there's much more important things going on with the hijinks that may, occur. So I am not going to get to reading too much tonight because I am going to bed, and I'll get started on this probably in the morning, and hopefully by early afternoon I'll be halfway through the book, if not before. I do have a couple things I have to do tomorrow, including going to the grocery store so I have food to cook. But hopefully hopefully it's one of those books again that's a little bit of a quick read and I can get through half of the book by early afternoon. We'll find out tomorrow, or I guess later today because it is after midnight now. So I'll see you guys then. All right, I am back. It is 6 o'clock at night the next day since I last talked to you, and I finally made it halfway through What Happened at Christmas. And it didn't take me this long to get halfway through the book because I'm not liking it. It's just that I ended up going to a couple of grocery stores, fighting some crowds because I guess there's supposed to be a snowstorm this weekend. I really just needed food to begin with. So I wanted just to get all my food buying completed so I don't have to go back out later this week because I'm sure it's just going to get worse. And I didn't really read too much today until late this afternoon, which is why I'm now only halfway through the book instead of completed it like I had hoped. But anyway, the book we're reading is What Happened at Christmas along the vibes of, what stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. This is pretty much along the same theme. So this book follows Lady Camille, whose history is when she was younger, she ended up marrying a wealthy aristocrat. She also came from a aristocratic family, and when her husband died, it's been about 3 or 4 years since then, and her eyes have fallen upon this prince that she has met, and she's decided that she is going to remarry the prince. The only thing that concerns her is that her family is not as aristocratic as she would hope, not as proper, not like an English, proper family, I guess you could say. And she has this bright idea to invite the prince over at Christmas, and instead of her family being there, she is going to hire a actor group to pretend to be her family, pretend to be the servants, and pretend to be the cook, and thus present the prince with a proper English Christmas and a proper English aristocratic family. But it wouldn't be a story if things didn't go wrong. The actors that she hired are not the most talented actors, and even on the very first day, she realizes that this is going to be harder than she thought. And to make matters worse, her childhood crush, Grayson, is back in the UK after being gone for 11 years, and he also has feelings for her and has somehow managed to get himself an invitation to her manor for the holidays as well. And this book is being told from the viewpoints of Grayson and Lady Camille. So you kind of get to see how each of them are dealing with this ridiculous scenario, pretty much. The dialogue in this story is amazing. I am having such a fun time reading the dialogue, all the witty banter between all the different characters. Not only do we have these actors, Lady Camille's twin sister is also in town helping her get through this charade and is having a wonderful time watching all the shenanigans that are going on during this Christmas holiday. But on a more serious side, both Grayson and Camille's twin sister are not sure if the prince is truly a prince, truly who he says he is. And so they are also planning to investigate the mystery behind who the prince is. If he's truly a prince like he says he is, or if he is trying to swindle Camille. So there's a lot going on. I'm really enjoying the two main characters, Camille and Grace, and I'm having a lot of fun reading from their viewpoint. And I'm having a lot of fun kind of watching their back and forth because neither of them want to admit that they still have feelings for the other and are, just trying to get one up on each other. The dialogue, like I said, is great. There's a lot of witty dialogue. There's a lot of dry humor, a lot of sarcasm kind of going on, which I've been enjoying. The only downside is the prose kind of gets a little bit tiresome to read when there are these bigger blocks of prose. It kind of loses me for a little bit, but once we're back into the dialogue, back into the action, the story definitely picks back up from there. Again, I'm questioning the length of this book. If 400 pages is going to be a little bit too long for this story, I'm already feeling a little weariness reading it now that I'm about halfway through. The beginning, probably third of the story, really kept my attention, but as I crept closer to the middle, the action kind of slowed down a little bit and not as much has been going on. So I'm curious to see how the story is going to end, if the action kind of picks up as we get closer to the ending as well. Because I had been, loving it. Like I said, the dialogue, the crazy things that are occurring in this house. I'm hoping that that all kind of picks back up now that I am halfway through, now that I'm going on to the second half of the book. We'll see. I am going to get back to reading, like I said, at 6 o'clock at night, and I do want to finish this book tonight so that we can do our second roll. So I'll meet you guys back here, hopefully by 9 o'clock. We'll see. That is my goal. But I do have to have dinner as well. So I will see you back here in a little bit and let you know my final thoughts on what happened at Christmas. All right, I am back. It's 10:30 at night. I'm definitely getting tired, but I finished what happened at Christmas. Book is done, book is completed. Also, I did not realize it was the first book in a 5-book series. So, yay, we're going to add another book to a series list. We're doing good at that this game so far. Anyway, What Happened at Christmas is by Victoria Alexander again, and I felt the ending was a good ending. I felt like the last half of the book was a little bit different from the first half, which was more lighthearted. The second half started to get a little bit more serious. There wasn't as many antics and shenanigans that were occurring in the first half, though there were a couple of good twists in the story that kind of upped the ante a little bit in the last half of the book. I felt like the buildup in the relationship between the two main characters, Grayson and Camille, was done well. I felt like it all really made sense, the ups and downs as they kind of started to get to know each other again. And there was only one kind of misunderstanding trope in the story near the end. So there wasn't like a big misunderstanding, third act breakup type of thing going on, which I always appreciate because those are my least favorite things to read in a romance novel. So there's none of that, which was great. And I really did enjoy the two characters. I felt like their personalities were done well. I felt like there was definitely growth of the two characters throughout the book as well, which was nice, as they kind of started to understand why each other did what they did 11 years ago. And I felt like that was like a nice kind of closure from everything that had occurred beforehand. Like I said, this is a 5-book series. I know the next book is going to focus on Grayson's cousin, who is the heir to a lordship, or I think it was a lordship. And he also needs to find a fiance, and he's had no luck at that. So that looks like what the next book is going to focus on. And then the one after that looks like it's going to focus on the twins' younger sister. So definitely want to read those. I definitely enjoyed this book as a historical romance book. I do feel like it could have been a little bit shorter. I do feel like there were spots that kind of dragged on throughout the story, But overall, I really had a fun time reading it. It was definitely mostly a lighthearted read. There wasn't a lot. There was some Christmassy stuff that went on, but there was not a lot of Christmas in it. So I feel like it's really good for a wintry read at any time during the winter because Christmas was kind of like a side thing going on. The main focus was on these charades with these actors and then how Grayson and Camille were going to rebuild their relationship after they kind of not really broke up because they were never together, but kind of had a falling apart 11 years ago. So overall, I give this probably like a 3.7 out of 5. Definitely liked it well enough. Like I said, I want to continue on in the series at some point, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the books of the series, especially as she continues with the witty dialogue that she had in this story that I really enjoyed. So that's it for what happened at Christmas. Let's go ahead, bring up the game board, and see what we get for our next roll. There is a potential we finish the game in this roll. Let's see. All right, here's the game board once again. We have 5 spots to go and no more cover jar prompts, which means I'll at least get to have some say no matter what spot we land on. Let's go ahead, roll the dice, and see how far we're going. A 2, not very far at all. And we have another pick a prompt. Well, I did say there's just a potential of finishing the game. That did not happen. We only rolled a 2. We're back to the small rolls with this die. Not surprising. And we landed on another pick a prompt. So let me bring up the prompt wheel and see what prompt we're going to use to choose our next book for this game. All right, here we go. Let's spin the wheel and see what prompt we're going to get. Hopefully it's a much easier one than the last one because it took me like an hour to find this book. Okay, a book that referenced night. It can be in the title, in the cover, or on the description. This is a little bit easier because at least I can Google the word night or something that has to do with night. So let me start picking out some options and I will be back shortly. Hopefully, a lot more shortly than I did when I tried to find a book with a sleigh on the cover. So I'll be back shortly, like I said. All right, I am back. It's 11 o'clock at night. It took me a good 20 minutes to decide on what book I was going to choose for this prompt, not because I was having difficulty finding choices, it's because I was overwhelmed by how many choices there were out there. And that is because apparently at some point, night in the title, I assume, was a buzzword. And therefore, there were lists of hundreds of books that had night in the title. So it was very overwhelming, kind of narrowing it down to the book I'm going to choose. There were some mystery thriller books, including Middle of the Night, which is actually on my 25 books to read in 2026. But I wasn't really ready for another mystery thriller since we already read The Sanatorium, 2 books ago. There were some fantasy books, but those books were almost all over 500, 550 pages. And I was hoping for a little bit of a shorter book. There was even a book that was a sequel to a book that I read earlier, well, not earlier this year, we're in January, last year. And it was called, I think the book I read last year was Under the Never Sky, and then this was the second book in the series. It was like a science fiction dystopian book that I really enjoyed, but I ended up going in a different direction. So I ended up going with this middle grade book that I heard about on somebody's channel a while back. I cannot remember whose booktube channel I heard this book on, but it's a it's a mystery fantasy middle grade book called Amari and the Night Brothers. It's by B.B. Alston, and it's the first book in the Supernatural Investigation series. It has Night in the title and Night Brothers, and it also has super high ratings and was also a nominee for favorite middle grade and children's book back in 2021. So I felt like this was a great book to go with because it is late at night and I just want to have a book that I don't have to concentrate too hard on and can just enjoy reading. So this is a middle grade supernatural adventure series that follows Amari Peters. And in this first book, her big brother Quentin has gone missing, and all Amari knows is that it may have something to do with the mysterious job that he holds. Soon after, Amari ends up getting an invitation to the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, and she is certain that this invitation is going to hold the key to finding her big brother. But first, she has to get her head around that there's actually a supernatural world that has mermaids and aliens and magicians, and her roommate at this academy that she's going to is a were-dragon. Unfortunately, she has to compete against kids who have known about the supernatural world their entire lives, and when each trainee is awarded their supernatural talent, she ends up being given a illegal talent, one that the Bureau views as dangerous. Because of this, when a evil magician threatens the supernatural world, her own classmates think she is the enemy, and Amari has never felt more alone. But if she doesn't pass the tryouts, she may never find out what happened to Quentin. So this book sounds like it's going to be a good read. I love middle grade adventure series. They're usually just a fun, lighthearted read that, like I said, doesn't take a lot of concentration. And as it is 11 o'clock at night, that sounds perfect to me. So I am going to get to reading this book, and I will meet you back here tomorrow when I'm halfway done and let you know how it's going. Like I said, this has very high ratings, so I have high hopes for this story, and I'll see you guys in the morning. All right, it is a brand new day. It is noon, a little afternoon, lunchtime. And I am halfway through Amari and the Night Brothers. So not too bad, halfway through. Moving along at a decent pace, I suppose. And so far, I've really been enjoying this book. It's been a fun middle grade read. I always find middle grade books a little bit difficult to review because they are obviously not meant for my age group. They're meant for, kids in that middle grade range. But I will say, somewhere, I think on the blurb of this book, I read that this is a book that would be great for people who enjoy Percy Jackson, and I can definitely see the similarities between the two books, and I feel like that blurb kind of hits it correct. So this book follows Amari, who, when the book starts off, is going to a private school on a scholarship, and she is always getting bullied basically at this private school, mainly because she is a scholarship student from, the other side of town, and the girls in her grade level don't think that she belongs there. So they are always bullying her. So the book starts off on the last day of school. Amari's scholarship has just been rescinded, and she's just been having a difficult time overall because her big brother Quentin, who is like 10 years older than her, disappeared 6 months ago, and no one knows what has happened to him. So her mother ends up taking her home, and there she finds that her big brother sent her something. She doesn't know how that is, but what it does is it leads her to this secret organization known as the Bureau of the Supernatural. So there are some similarities between Percy Jackson in this series in that we have the main character bullied at school, no idea that there is a supernatural world outside of the human world, and all of a sudden they are kind of thrust into that supernatural world and have to come to terms with that. Both books take place at summer camp. So Amari is invited to the summer camp of the Bureau of the Supernatural, and this is a summer camp where they train kids basically to become employees of this bureau when they graduate the summer camp when they're, 18. So at the summer camp, one of the very first things that occurs is that each of the kids who are attending the summer camp have to be assigned or given, I guess, a magical talent. And when it is Amari's turn, she ends up getting a talent that is illegal, which makes her integration into the school even more difficult. And also, because of that, and because of her being Quentin's brother, she ends up again getting some enemies and being bullied at this school as well. Though at this school, she has some friends and some backup. So while Percy Jackson and Amari books are very different as far as the plot goes, there is definitely some similarities between them. And I can definitely see that kids who enjoy the Percy Jackson series will probably enjoy this series as well. At least, as far as I've read, which is halfway through the first book in the series. I also have been enjoying it. I feel like the plot is fun and interesting, and I am enjoying reading things from Amari's standpoint as she tries to solve what happened to her brother Quentin and kind of everything that's been thrown at her as she tries to get this mystery solved. I've enjoyed the characters in the stories as well. I definitely feel like they're well written, and I've enjoyed how they kind of engage with Amari and There's been already been some twists along the way, so that's been kind of fun as well. And I'm interested to see how this book is going to end between Amari's illegal talent and her trying to find her brother and these rogue magicians that are trying to take down the Bureau. There's a lot going on. So I'm curious to see how the author's going to pull this all together. And yeah, that's really all I've got so far in the story. So I'm going to get to reading so we can get this book completed and see where this game takes us next. So I'll be back once I have finished the book, and I'll see you guys then. All right, I am back. It's 3:30 in the afternoon, and I have completed the third book of the game, Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. And it was just a great middle grade book. It was so much fun to read. And I feel like if you like the Percy Jackson adventure type story, that you'll definitely like this book as well. And I assume the rest of the series, though I can't say for sure because this is the first and only book I've read so far in the series. But if the rest of the books kind of continue along this path, I expect that I'm going to enjoy them as well. So this was a fun adventure book filled with classes, school, quests, trials, pretty much, anything you could ask for in a middle grade adventure series. I really enjoyed reading the book from the viewpoint of the main character, Amari. I felt like she had great character growth from the beginning to the end of the book, and you could really see the changes in her as she became more, what's the word? There is a word. Confident. There we go. More confident in her own abilities and her own capabilities than she had been at the beginning of the book, always kind of comparing herself to her older brother, who was a genius basically in his own way. She never felt that she could ever get up to the heights that he did. And it was nice kind of seeing her realize that she had great potential in and of herself, and she just has to believe in herself to be able to do the things that she did in this book. I really like the side character too, her best friend Elsie, who was also her roommate and the were dragon. And I felt like they made a good pair in the story, kind of building each other up and giving each other confidence to succeed in the quests and the adventures that they went on in this story. So the plot in this book was great. The adventure, the characters in this book, I enjoyed all of them. The world building was pretty good as well. At least as far as the bureau went, I felt like all the different departments that the author developed were very kind of like intricate and thought out. The world building outside the bureau wasn't as completely built, I guess you could say, but in middle grade stories where the main point is the adventure and the quest, it didn't really detract from the book at all. The most important thing was that, in my opinion, was that the burrow was developed well, and I thought that was definitely the case. And I liked all kind of like the unique things that the author put within the bureau to help just make the story a fun read. So I would say if you enjoy the Percy Jackson series, this is definitely a series to check out. And I am looking forward to reading the rest of the books in the series. This was also the author's debut novel as well, and I cannot wait to read the other books in the series. I think the next one, I don't know if it's the last one. The next one comes out, oh, it's this year. I almost said next year, but this year is 2026. So it comes out sometime this year. I always like reading a author's debut novel as the very first book I read for them, because it's always interesting as I read the other books to see how the author has grown in the writing career, and I can't wait to do it with the Amari series, the Supernatural Investigation series, which I think is the official name. So I will definitely be doing that as well, adding yet another book to my to do series list. And yeah, that's it for Amari and the Night Brothers. I am so happy that I chose this book to read. So let's bring up the game board and let's see what we get for our fourth roll of the game. All right, here we are on roll number 4. Anything 4 or higher means we have finished this game. Oops, I just dropped the die. Let's go ahead and do our fourth roll. Here we go. And it's a 3, which is another pick a prompt. All right. I have a little confession to make. I actually did this roll last night because I honestly thought that it was going to be the last roll of the game and that Amari was going to be the last book that I read. So I just wanted to get the last roll done with. But as you saw, I only got a 3, and it was not the last roll of the game, which means we will be reading another book. And once again, we will be using the prompt wheel to choose what that book is going to be. So let me bring up the prompt wheel real quick and we'll go ahead and choose what will definitely be our last book of the game because we are on the last spot on the board. All right, let's do this. Let's get this last prompt done. Here we go. Hopefully, this is another good, easy one that gives me a lot of choices. Right. Book where characters are trapped due to snow. All right. I feel like this is a trope, characters being snowstormed in. I feel like a lot of these where the characters get snowed in are mystery thrillers, and I was actually kind of in the mood for a mystery thriller. It could also be romances. There are a lot of romances with this trope as well. So I'm gonna see what I can come across. I'm kind of leaning towards a mystery thriller if I can find one, but let me go look at some options and I'll meet you guys back here once I have either narrowed it down to some options or maybe even decided on the option I'm going to go with because I don't really know this point in time. So I'll meet you guys back here shortly and let you know what book we'll be reading next. All right, as expected, most of the books I found were either mystery thrillers or romances. And I did decide to go with a mystery thriller. I narrowed it down to two books. The two books that I narrowed it down to were Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. I have not read a Darcy Coates before. This one is more of a horror thriller than just a mystery thriller. And it takes place in the Rocky Mountains in a remote cabin where 8 strangers get stranded in the snowstorm, and one of them happens to be a killer. The other book is The Overnight Guest. This one's by Heather Gudenkoff and was actually a nominee for Mystery Thriller category in 2022. And in this book follows true crime writer Wiley, who gets snowed in a isolated farmhouse where she's retreated to write her new book. And it also happens to be a farmhouse where 2 people were murdered and a girl disappeared without a trace. So she ends up getting snowed in and finds herself trapped inside the house. And then she ends up discovering a small child in the snow just outside. She brings that child in and begins to ask questions, search for answers, and it soon becomes clear that the farmhouse isn't as isolated as she thought, and someone is willing to do anything to find them. So, those are 2 options. I think the option I'm going to go with is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkoff for 2 reasons. One, it's not horror, and I'm not quite in the mood for the horror genre today. I'm more in the mystery thriller side of things. And it's also the shorter of the 2 books. It's only 316 pages, which is much shorter than the last 3 books that we read, which were all basically 400 pages. So it'll be nice to have a quick mystery thriller, I'm hoping. So I'm going to get to reading because it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I need to get this book done today. This video technically should go out tomorrow, which is Friday, and I still have this entire book to read, so we'll see how that goes, and then a video to edit. And my cat is about to join me because it's also tea time and she wants her tea time treat. So I am going to go get all that done and start reading this book, and I'll meet you guys back here when I'm halfway through, which hopefully won't take too long. So I'll see you guys soon. All right, I am back. It is now 10 o'clock at night, and I've actually completed The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkoff, I believe the author's name is. And yeah, I realized I didn't stop in and give you an update halfway through, but it was one of those books that I just wanted to continue to read and see what happened. Also, I don't know what is going on with my audio. Like sometimes it's been recording really loud, sometimes very softly, so I'm interested to see how this is going to edit, so that will be a fun time, I'm sure. So sorry for the audio on this video if it's kind of all over the place. I guess I'll find out when I'm editing it. All right, so The Overnight Guest. I always find it difficult to figure out how to review these mystery thrillers without giving away any big spoilers, but the first big thing about the story that I enjoyed is kind of how it was told. So we're following 3 different storylines basically. And each storyline is told from multiple people's point of view. The first storyline takes place in the past in 2000, and it's the storyline of Josie and her family. Her parents end up getting murdered, and her big brother, and her best friend Becky end up disappearing that same night. So that's kind of where the first storyline that we are following is figuring out who killed her parents and what happened to her brother and her best friend. And that's kind of the crime that needs to be solved in that first storyline. The second storyline is in present day and follows Wiley. And Wiley is a true crime novelist who's working on her latest. Is novelist the right word when they're writing true crime? I don't know. She's a true crime author and she's writing her latest book and she's kind of finishing up the final manuscript and editing. And to do that, she wanted to go to kind of a secluded place. So she rents out this house that's on a farm, so kind of far away from, other places. And as she's finishing off her final edits, a big snowstorm, a blizzard kind of comes through, and she's kind of stranded in this house. And the same night that the blizzard is coming through, she ends up finding a small child outside her house who she kind of, has to bring into her house, or else that child is going to freeze. And the child, she has no idea who this child is. She has no idea why the child or how the child got into her, front yard basically. And that is kind of the storyline that needs to be solved in the present day. Who is this child? Where did this child come from? And, how is Wiley going to figure this all out when she is also trying to survive a major blizzard and keep this child alive? So that is the second storyline that we're following. And then the last storyline is a interesting storyline. We don't know when it takes place, whether it's in the past, whether it's in the present, well, it's not really in the future, but whether it's in the past, the present, or somewhere between, the past with Josie's family and the present with Wiley. We're not quite sure when it is occurring, but basically it follows a girl. Although my overhead lights just went out because it's on vacation time because I never take it off vacation time. So that is why the lighting just changed. Anyway, this viewpoint follows a girl we don't know the name of, her mom we also don't know the name of or who this woman is, and the girl's father, who again we don't really know anything about. And this storyline kind of follows them and their life in this house, basically. So, those are the three storylines that we follow. I felt like it was a very interesting way to tell the story, and I really enjoyed how the author used these storylines to tell the story that she did tell. So that is kind of how the story is told and the storylines that we are following through the book. So overall, I did enjoy this mystery thriller. I gave it a 3.75 because I think there was a little bit more unique aspects to this mystery thriller than the sanatorium, which is why I gave it a little bit of a higher rating than the sanatorium, but there was nothing that like super stood out to me, which is why I didn't rate it, any higher. So as far as a mystery thriller goes, it's basically what I expect a mystery thriller to be. It's a good plot, it's a good storyline, there's some good tension building, and I enjoyed how the story ended as well. I thought that the author kind of concluded the story well and brought all the plot pieces, the plot lines together in a great way. So, definitely a mystery thriller that I enjoyed. I will say the storyline that followed Wiley got me annoyed at times because Wiley made some interesting decisions that I felt weren't the best decisions at the time. And I felt that there were some other decisions that she could have made that would have been smarter. But, she was in the middle of a blizzard trying to care for a small child. So she probably wasn't really thinking things through and making more spur of the moment decisions. And I think that's where some of those bad decisions came from. But it did get to the point where I was like, can't you just make can't like why didn't you make this choice instead of that choice? But it did, add up, give us some more tension in the story. So um it made the story a little bit longer than it may have been otherwise. I also enjoyed Wiley's viewpoint because I felt like it was definitely a little bit more atmospheric than the viewpoint in the past. I think it's because it was in the winter time and there's a blizzard and it was cold out, and I just feel that it just that the weather alone just kind of built up the tension and the suspense as well, made it a little bit more atmospheric. So I did enjoy the snowed in aspect of it. If you're looking for a very high intense storyline with lots of suspense, this probably may not meet that criteria. There's definitely some suspense and tension to it, but I have read several books that had um higher tension than this story did that definitely had me kind of holding my breath to see what was going to happen next. I do feel like the pace in this book was good, and I think part of that was jumping between the three different storylines. I felt like that was just a kind of interesting way to go about writing this novel, and it definitely made the novel read faster because I always wanted to get to the next few or the next storyline to see what was going on there, and it kept me reading, kept me going, kept me engaged in the story. So I felt like that was a great aspect of this book. So yeah, that is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkoff, and that will be the final book of this reading game. Let's bring up the game board one more time so we can officially say that we are done, but this will be our last roll. All right, let's go ahead and do what should be our last roll of the game. Here we go. Any number, we have completed the game. Yay! And it's of course, now we get the 7. We've made it to the finish line. Of course, on our last roll, we get a 7, but that is fine. We have completed the winter reading game for 2026 with 4 books read, a couple mystery thrillers, a supernatural adventure, and a historical romance book. So quite a eclectic bunch of books. I hope you enjoyed all the different book choices that we got in this game, and thank you so much for joining me for this video. I had so much fun playing this game, and I am very happy with the books that we got. I think they were all pretty great books to read for this winter reading game. So this video will hopefully come out on Friday, maybe Saturday, depending on how quickly I can edit it tomorrow. Um, but next week, our next video that will definitely come out on Friday will be our February TBR. We're almost already into the second month of February, and we'll see how I have done in my January TBR when we get around to recording that one. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope everyone's January is going well. If you enjoy this video, please hit that like button. If you want to let me know that you watched the video, let's use a snowflake emoji because this is the winter reading game. So anything to do with snow, snowman, snowflakes, anything like that would be perfect. If you read any of these books on this game, let me know what you thought about them, and also what books you would have chosen for some of these prompts that came up, especially if you have any books that have sleighs on them, because that was the most difficult prompt I have gotten in the game. But I was happy with the choice. I had a lot of fun reading that book, What Happened at Christmas. Once again, thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope everyone stays warm this weekend. And if you want to see future videos by me, including my TBR game that will be coming out next week, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you again for joining me for this video. I hope everyone stays warm and safe this weekend. And I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye.